Hey guys, it's Fitz from Primal WoW, and this is going to be a full ZG walkthrough. It's going to be a little bit long just by necessity, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. Now, I really like ZG for a couple reasons. It's got a pretty good challenge level. You know, a lot of people say you need better gear for ZG than it gives. I disagree. I don't think you really need a lot of gear for here. I just think it takes a little bit of execution. So as opposed to Molten Core instances like that before, you could really sleepwalk through. You can't do that here. Pretty much all the boss fights are multi-phase. You have to change up what you're doing. You might have to change targets, that sort of thing. And it's not really challenging, but it just requires some attention. And even if you've got great gear, there's some good things out of here. For example, enchants and that sort of thing that you can find use of. You know, even if you've got way better gear than what you could get in here. But all in all, it's a fun instance, and I think if you're raiding for loot, you're doing it for the wrong reason anyway. Now, at the top here, I just want to say this is not the smoothest run I've ever had in Zul'Gurub. This was pretty much well, it wasn't pretty much, it was an alt raid. Even you can see here, I'm on my alt Resto Shaman rather than my Warlock. And a lot of people were fresh 60s, hadn't been in here before. We had a new tank that we were sort of training for Zul'Gurub. So, you know, it's a little bit rough, but obviously still finished it. But in the end, I think that's probably best. You know, you could see what this is going to be like if you're coming in here with, you know, mostly dungeon gear, maybe a little bit of raid gear. But all in all, this raid did not have a high gear level. You know, most of us have alts and Blackwing layer gear and that sort of thing, but not this particular raid. So hopefully I think that'll be useful for some people. The other thing I want to do here is give you a little bit of heads up on some of the trash, because they can actually be fairly challenging. The trash we're killing here, you can see there were groups of bats. The bat riders will explode as they get low on health, so all it requires is just a few people to interrupt, and generally it's probably a best idea to go through them DPS target by target rather than AE, so you don't have multiple targets trying to blow up at the same time. So basically just need some interrupts, and you can't just kind of, you know, AE tank it and AE through it. Okay, this fight here is Jeklik, the Bat Boss. This is, like I said earlier, this is like a lot of the fights in here is going to be a two-phase fight. In the first phase, she's going to be in bat form. What you want to do is you can see our group stacking up here. All the range stack in one area at max range, about 30 yards away. And the tanks and the melee you can see up in front of us. You need one tank for the boss herself. And what she'll also do is she will charge a target within 20 yards. I don't know if it's the closest target, but I think she has a max range on it, but you need to set up a tank to take her charge. So you can see here the tank has got the purple diamond. He's going to be in between us and the melee, us being the ranged and the melee and tanks. He could also line up kind of in a triangle formation, just as long as he is about 20 yards from the boss, or she is 20 yards from the boss, and the ranged is at max range. I guess you don't really have to stack the range so much, but it just makes it easier for the tank to see where the ranged are and make sure he's the closest one. She'll you pull her down off the wall there, and just make sure that, you know, she'll probably get removed as the charges happen. So just range, you just have to keep aware that you're staying at max range. You don't want to be too close to that tank accepting the charges, or else you'll be silenced. When she charges, she knocks that guy down and silences, so you don't want your healers being silenced. She also does a little bit of AE damage on the melee, so just the healers have to be aware of that. You can see this is a timed event. We've got some little bat ads that come down as a group. The tank that's taking the charges does not need to be going into the ranged DPS, or else the charge is going to hit all the ranged DPS and healers. But they are fairly easy to AE down. So basically, if you have like at least a mage and a warlock, something like that, just AE that bad group down really quick, and it's not really that challenging. Okay, now we're in phase 2. You can see she's changed into troll form. At this point, everybody needs to spread out, because what's going to happen is there are bat riders flying around above us, and they're going to throw down these fireballs down onto the ground. They kind of linger a little bit. You know, standard don't stand in fire. But for the DPS, especially melee DPS, she will be casting a heal periodically, as well as a mind flay that hits pretty hard. Now, priority is to stop the heal that she has, because it's pretty significant. But basically, just interrupt, you know, stay out of the fire, and you can see the tank moving around to keep the melee out of the fire as well. And all in all, not too difficult. Okay, second boss, Snake Boss. This guy can be fairly challenging. Usually groups will take him down, but it's typical to see some wipes, and in fact our execution on this boss was not terrific, although I don't think we had anybody die. Again, he's two-phase. First phase, he and his little snake buddies up there need to get downed, and then he changes into a snake. What's going to happen is the tank that is going to be tanking all his ads pulls him, and the tank that's going to be tanking the boss himself pulls him out of that group there. Your ranged DPS need to AE down this pack of snakes really quick. They're not difficult at all. However, you can see one of the things we're not doing properly here is that all the ranged and melee need to stay at least something like 25 yards away from him. He has a really nasty kind of chain. It's not really lightning, but it's just a chain attack, and it can very easily one-shot you. It can do something like 100,000 damage or something like that. So it's intended to kill you. So you need to stay at max range from him. I think we got lucky here, but healers in range need to stay max range from him. Now he actually hits fairly hard at this phase. But is otherwise not too difficult. The only difficulty is those ads, and they go down pretty quick with AE, so really not too difficult. But really the challenge comes when he hits 50%, which will happen here shortly, and he goes into phase 2. At that point, he no longer does that chain attack, but he lays down kind of a like a poison cloud on the ground that the tank will have to move him out of, and people will need to stay out of. He's also shoots poison at people, which needs to get cleansed, although it's not really too difficult. But he hits hard at this phase. When you're at low gear levels, what's very typical is you'll have tanks kind of ping-pong them as best they can, or you can see the stairs leading up to the left, especially like a feral druid can taunt them and run up those stairs and kind of kite him around as best you can. And he enrages here. He does a lot of damage to the tanks, so if your tanks are not geared, you could consider kind of trying to kite him, ping-pong him a little bit with tanks, that sort of stuff. Now one of our tanks here is fairly well geared, so we're able to deal with it fairly well, but you'll see that the tank will also need to move him around to keep him out of those poison clouds. So basically, it's just a challenging fight for the healers, and the DPS needs to get him down as fast as possible once he hits his snake phase. Now, Spider Boss, typically you'll do at the end. So I just put this in order of how they appear in the instance, but a lot of times a raid will either leave her up and not kill her, or leave her for the end, because she can be fairly difficult to take down. This is sort of a two-phase fight, but it's just alternating back and forth, Spider and Priestess. Initially, as you aggro her, she'll put a bunch of spiders on the raid, which you can't really see because we're all packed up here. But those need to get AE down as fast as possible, or else they'll actually get fairly strong. Now here you can see everybody in the raid just got poisoned. That's the difficulty with one of the difficulties with this fight. And Shaman obviously make a huge difference if you can spread out a couple Shaman within the raid, but otherwise just the poisons need to get cleansed as fast as possible. And you can see that she does that fairly periodically. The other thing that she does, which is a major issue with this fight, is she will turn into a snake and then wrap everyone in what she's doing right now, and wrap everybody in spider webs, and you can't do anything for, I don't know, 5 or 6 seconds. So the two tanks need to stay on top of threat. You know, if one tank gets wrapped up, the other tank needs to take it. So if there's a DPS that's number 2 on the threat meter, they're probably going to die, because she will be on him or her, and the healers are going to be wrapped in webs, so they can't heal you. So basically, just ranged DPS just need to watch their threat a little bit. Other than that, not too difficult. Just cleanse the poisons, take her down, and collect her loot. Okay, out of order again here. The Bloodlord is typically done last, because what's going to happen is almost invariably on this fight you're going to rack up a bunch of durability hits to your gear, because this fight is mechanically set up to kill you multiple times. Now I think on retail when you die on this fight you don't take a durability hit, but here on Primal you do. And although I guess it's not really so much expensive in Wrath of the Lich King, you don't want people with red gear in your raid, so that's why you leave this guy for last typically. He also drops pretty good gear, so you know, don't miss him, but definitely leave him for last. Now you can see we're all stacked up behind this pillar because we want to be out of line of sight of the Bloodlord. He can charge people, and the way he does that is he has this kind of debuff that he's looking at you, and you get little eyes that pop over your head. Now on retail, this was set up so that you can't move. If you move, he'll charge you. If you just stand still, he will leave you alone. However, on Primal WoW, it's by line of sight. So if you get that debuff, you need to get out of line of sight. Now this fight started off very badly for our raid, so it ended up not doing so well. He is largely untankable. We've certainly, when we have really good geared tanks, we've tanked him straight up and just killed him. But mainly you want to ping pong him back and forth. And now what we're doing here is there's a little speaker at the bottom of his ziggurat. When you kill the speaker, he comes down with his raptor. They split up, and generally what the raid is going to do is they're going to take the raptor, kill the raptor. Now if you kill his raptor and he's alive, he'll get a rage for 2 minutes. So typically what happens is that out of line of sight here, we've got a hunter, or a feral can also, or a druid can also do it. Just kiting him around his ziggurat, staying out of line of sight, just running him around his ziggurat. And typically what you'll do is you'll wait the 2 minutes for that enrage to fade off before the raid picks him up. However, somebody was not out of line of sight here, and you can see him to the left of the screen. He's looking at somebody right around me, and he comes over and he has a whirlwind attack, and he's going to kill the entire raid. Boom. We're all down pretty much. Well, not everybody, but most of us. However, you'll get rezzed by these ghosts that form around the ring here. I will advise that you stay on the grassy area towards the wall over here. On Primal WoW, it's a little bit buggy. There are certain spots where you will not get rezzed by those chain spirits. And if that happens, don't release and run back or anything. Just stay there and accept loot, because typically you'll be res bugged as well. But what will happen is this fight basically intends to kill people, and these ghosts will res you back up. As you die, he dings, and he gets more powerful and larger. You can see he just did it there. But what generally happens is that 2 or 3 tanks will kind of ping pong them with taunts back and forth on this road area that I'm on right now, and all the ranged and melee DPS will just take them down as best they can. People are gonna die. You can't really save anybody, and to be honest, healers often on this fight will just focus on damage, because it's really almost pointless to heal. When he gets up more than just a few dings, he's gonna one-shot pretty much anybody. So healing is nearly pointless on this encounter. Here, I figure we've got good enough damage. I just focus on trying to heal the tanks. Often you'll see him whirlwind, and so melee DPS will typically eat those whirlwinds, and they might survive them. So I'm just healing up people just to try and keep them up as best as I can. But it's not too uncommon for healers just to basically just go DPS on this, and basically, instead of healing, just people will die, they come back in, and that's how you heal. And you can see this is not a very clean fight. We've got people dying, and it's not really too uncommon for just to kind of have some bad luck like we did, where he came in early and wiped the raid, and it can be pretty nasty. But really, you have to screw this up pretty bad not to take him down. It's just basically how many deaths do you want to eat. And also, if your tanks are pretty experienced on this and they get used to kind of kiting him back and forth, it can be much better. Now you can see I am not paying good attention here because I have that debuff where he's looking at me and I'm not getting out of line of sight. But I got lucky there. So, basically, just do as much damage as you can before you die. Hopefully your tanks will be able to kite him back and forth enough to let your ranged and melee DPS stand up. Watch out for his whirlwind. You get about a second warning when he does it, but just stay out of it as best you can, and you're going to get him down. Okay, Tiger Boss. And one thing before we get into the boss here that I want to say is that there are lots of mobs around this area called axe throwers or axe something or other. Um, this is important for tanks. Don't stand still when you're tanking them. They need to be moved. If they stay still for a long period of time, they'll do this periodic whirlwind thing, which will just tear your melee DPS up. So tanks, um, the axe throwers, keep them moving. A lot of times tanks will just run in a circle or just backpedal slowly and just keep them moving just enough where they're not going to do that whirlwind. But getting onto the boss here, this initial phase, you pull him and he's got a couple priests that come with him. Now on retail, it's intended that they have to be killed at the exact same time or they'll res each other. And here, that's a little buggy. You don't really have to do that on Primal WoW. However, sometimes they will bug out if they get killed. It's a little bit tricky. What you'll frequently see raids do is you'll have somebody with Shadow Meld or Vanish or Feign Death or something like that, pluck him, run him down, and then use their kind of get out of jail free card, and the ads will go back. The boss will keep coming down, and you get him alone. It might combat bug you, but you'll still be able to get him solo. Now in this phase, it's not really too difficult. You want to kill his ads, then kill him. He goes all the way to 0% in this phase, but there's a second phase after this. But you'll kill him all the way down. You can see the boss himself, Thekal, is just immediately to my right here. Now he has a Mortal Strike and hits fairly hard, but otherwise this phase, just keep the tanks up and DPS, knock down the ads, them, him. Not really entirely difficult. As he gets closer to 0 here, just speaking about the second phase, what's going to happen is he's going to turn into a giant tiger. He has two main attacks, an AE knockback, and he has a Mortal Strike again in this phase. And he hits very hard, so what you'll typically see with undergeared tanks and healers is you'll kite them around the room as best you can. Hunters are great at this. They can still do some damage, kite them around, but basically everybody just does damage. If you get aggro, run away from them. You're not going to be able to keep a tank up for this fight if they're not at least decently geared, and the healers can compensate. But really not, the kiting itself not too difficult. What's also going to happen is you'll see at his feet tigers are going to spawn periodically throughout the fight. You want to ignore them as best you can, frost traps, AE fears, that sort of thing. Just deal with them as best you can because they will disappear as soon as the fight is over. The better your DPS, the less of those tigers you're going to see. Prot Paladin tanks are great for just kind of picking those things up and just, locking them up. Nobody has to worry about them. They don't really hit too hard. The difficulty is trying to keep the tanks alive throughout the damage he's pushing out while getting knocked back periodically, maybe having a tiger aggro you, that sort of thing. But aside from tank and heals, not too difficult. Okay, Panther Boss is probably the easiest boss in this dungeon. She alternates between two phases. You can see a gong back here at the back of her room, which you click on, it summons her. You can see kind of two cubbies, two stalls to the left and right. Panthers, which really don't hit hard at all. I don't think they're elite or anything like that, and they go down fairly easily. Will spawn very regularly, probably every second or two out of those cubbies, and attack the raid the whole time. Often they'll come towards the tanks, especially if you have a pally tank. Those panthers are going to stay there, and just the hunter's volley that's going to be on the boss is enough to just take them down. So really, they're not too difficult. She will attack and vanish periodically. So in the vanish phases, you just deal with the panthers, healers, get your mana back up. Tanks just basically sit there and be ready to pick her back up when she reappears, because the one difficulty of this fight is she will occasionally just appear almost on top of a DPSer who's got high threat, and she hits fairly hard on a Clothy, for example. So healers and tanks gotta be really quick to pick her up once she comes back up, and make sure you keep your DPS alive. You can see our tank with the moon over his head is just standing there, just waiting for her to appear. The DPS are very capable of taking down those panthers without really any challenge at all. So just back and forth, kill her, kill panthers, kill her. While this easy fight is going on, I'm going to set up the next fight because my recording crapped out on me, and I only got a piece of the fight, unfortunately, which, to be honest, is probably for the best because it wasn't exactly pretty. It's Jin'do the Hexer is who I'm going to have next on here. He has two abilities of consequence, and they're both totems. He has a healing totem, and he has a mind control totem. I think it's called a brainwash totem. Both those totems need to be taken down ASAP. The brainwash totem in particular, it's gonna generally hit somebody in melee range to him, and which is very often a tank. So 2 tanks have to be on him and be ready to pick him up. And obviously you want to take down the healing totem for obvious reasons. But the brainwash totem is the one that everybody really needs to focus on when it comes up, and they're both fairly rarely. He probably drops them both about every 10 seconds or so. So basically, kill the totems and win for him. And he'll be up here in another minute or two, and I'll get back to him when he shows up. Okay, Jin'do the Hexer. Now this pull is a mess because I think our tank was expecting to just get the AE pack in front of him. I think he pulled the normal mob, which allows you to pull the whole pack and not get the boss, but just we got unlucky and got the boss, so there was a little bit of confusion right at the start. But basically once our tanks and AE peoples figured it out, they got the ads down, and then we focused on the boss, but it was still pretty rough. Now the boss, you generally want to tank him in front of this blood pool, just in front of me, because one of his other abilities is that he will pull, or he will randomly teleport a member of the raid into that blood pool. You can see skeletons forming, so you want those skeletons not to just be sitting around. A lot of times people will make the mistake that AEers will try to take down those skeletons. Now you really don't want that, and you'll see our AEers are doing that originally. Basically you just want a hunter volley on it, just enough to kill the skeletons, which have almost no life, but not, you don't want to be just pumping out tons of AE damage, because you know, he's got that brainwash totem. If you're pumping in a lot of AE damage on top of his head, you're going to kill whoever gets brainwashed. So basically, you just want a volley on him, period. You know, the whole fight, which is nothing out of ordinary here on Primal, and that's going to be able to handle the skeletons that form. And you can see he's popping down these brainwash totems, and while our DPS is trying to kill the ads, you know, it's staying up, but fairly rough. But you can see those totems pop up. You want to take them down as quick as possible. One thing of note, you can't dot them, and I don't know if AE attacks work on them or not. But basically, take down the totems with him, and you win. And lastly, we are to Hakkar here, the boss of the whole instance. The main thing about this fight really is that it's long. It's not really too challenging. It's just a long fight because he's got a lot of life and he heals himself. You want to spread the raid out. Nobody needs to be within 10 yards of each other. You can type /range space 10 if you've got deadly boss mods just to see if you're within range of anybody, because he has a single target dot attack that he'll just randomly throw out on a member of the raid, which, to be honest, is not really that big a deal. If you're a DPSer here, you want to heal yourself, and in some way possible, especially the ranged. Bandage yourself. It's a long fight. Pace yourself. And if everybody's taking damage and the healers are busy trying to keep all the ranged alive, it's going to be difficult for them to sustain for the entire fight. But his main mechanic is that he will mind control the tank. So on this fight, you need 2 tanks, and they'll just swap out as one gets mind control, the other one picks it up, and basically you win. He does have a period, I think it's every 80 seconds, he'll do this thing called Blood Siphon, which stuns everyone in the raid and heals him for 1,000 points a second from everybody in the raid. So what is that, 20,000 healing every second, and it lasts maybe 7 or 8 seconds. So he does pretty strong self-healing. So essentially, DPS and healers need to just pace themselves. It's going to be a long fight, and really the key here is just having a couple tanks that are pretty quick on the draw, and having gear where they're not taking tons of damage, because if the tanks are taking a lot of damage, that means that the healers are just going to go out of mana way before the fight ends. And you can see on this fight towards the end, this is an alt. I don't have great gear, and I run out of mana big time. I use a demonic stone, I use my mana tide, I use a mana potion, and I'm waiting for cooldowns to come back up, but I am just out of mana. But luckily we are able to squeak through. We have a couple healers that have enough mana to keep the tanks up, and I don't think we have any deaths on this fight, but it was a close call for me, at least, as a healer, as a very under-geared healer. But really, this is just a marathon of a fight. You need DPSers that can last for 5 minutes. If you're fresh in here, you don't have great gear, this fight could easily take you 6 or 7 minutes. And you can see his AE stun here, and he's healing himself. But really, it's just pacing yourself. Make sure you keep your mana up. Make sure you keep your ranged and melee up, and you'll win. And we'll let this fight go, and I'll catch you guys up at the end of the video. So guys and gals, I hope this video was useful to you. If you think I left anything out, or if you have anything to add, hit me up in the comments below. And otherwise, good luck in Zul'Gurub.